Welcome to the Remarkable Dentist Podcast with me, Fred Joyle, where I interview amazing dental practice owners digging into their successes and failures, their insights and hindsights, getting their views on where dentistry is going, and discovering what it took for them to become remarkable. Welcome to the Remarkable Dentist Podcast. I am here today with Dr. David Rice, who is living in St. Petersburg, Florida, and he's started a really remarkable company called IgniteDDS. And we're going to talk a lot about that, as well as the arc of his career, which has been very interesting. So, David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks for having me. How are you?
You know, it couldn't be better. Just as an aside, I did an ice plunge yesterday in Big Bear Lake. It was about 40 degrees, and my Apple Watch said that my heart rate went to 174. I think that might be too high. So David, give us the bullet on Ignite, because I want people to know, the large thing that you're working on, and then we're going to talk about how you got there.
Sure,
so
I'd love to.
What's IgniteDDS?
We're a giant mentorship community. So although we work with dental professionals of all ages and sort of all lanes within a dental practice, our focus has always been the young dentist, the dental student, the future of dentistry. And it's really cool. We're this community of built, kind of within homegrown. We have young dentists who really run everything with myself, and Kevin Henry's on our team, who kind of runs the team side of Ignite. And it's we're about 32,000 strong now. We're all over the U.S. and Canada, and kind of branching out in different countries. It's been an amazing journey to be here.
And Kevin Henry was originally the Kevin Henry I know came from dental economics, correct?
Yeah, Kevin started there, and he was an editor extraordinaire.
Yeah, he really knows the industry, and a wonderful guy as well, but and has contributed a tremendous amount to the industry. I'm very excited to hear that he's part of Ignite. So what does somebody get out of Ignite? I think, first of all, 32,000, that's great. And I love that it's the Canadians get to play too. I'm sure they appreciate it, because they're constantly complaining about being left out. It's like, why can't I buy this? Why can't I get this software? Well, because you got 400 different PMSs up there in Canada. You can't get it. Okay. We're sorry. Or your money's no good here, something, whatever. But yeah, so what's if I'm a young dentist, let's say I'm graduating from Tufts out of Boston, and I'm going, like, now what? What do I do?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I think most dental students today aren't all that dissimilar to I was 20. I'm not going to say this too loud, but 27 years ago when I graduated, and we're alone. We walk in, we have this amazing circle of colleagues and friends that surround us and support us. And then we walk across that stage, and in an instant, we're overwhelmed and alone. So, that's where we kind of carry the ball. So we love to build relationships with students are in school, so they know we're here to educate, support, and connect. Ultimately, we're here to connect young dentists to the very best people in the industry. And you and I know them because we've been in this industry for an awfully long time. So we have this filter, and we know who the top 10 percenters are, and maybe who the folks you could try to avoid in this giant ocean. So, that's my primary role. Every day we get probably 20 young dentists reaching out saying, I need help. And it can be in any one of these spaces that you might imagine a dentist who's just getting started would need. And our job is sometimes to be that help, and oftentimes just to say, hey, that's not me, but I know a great gal, or I know a great guy, and let me make the introduction, and they can help carry the ball for you.
So it's a combination of dentists who are, the 32,000 is a mix of a lot of mentors all around North America and beyond now. I'm sure the Australians want in as well. And these people, so they can join, like, they're in year one in D1, as they call it, and they can participate. You're inviting them in to Ignite DDS. So they're not, it's a well understood axiom that you learn nothing about the business of dentistry in dental school. And if they offered courses in it, you wouldn't take them because it won't help you pass your boards, right? But then, as you say, it happens in an instant that suddenly you're a business person. You're, of some kind, one way or another, whether even if you're an associate with a business, usually with a PC, right? And you'll probably recommend that they are that. Like, you need to become a corporation. And they go, well, what kind? I'll never forget the time I was at a meeting many years ago, and this attorney was explaining the absolute basics of corporations that they needed to form if they were to shield themselves. And at the end of it, he said to one of the dentists, he said, so do you understand the difference between a C Corp and an S Corp now? And the dentist goes, yeah. He says, do you think you could explain it to your wife? And he says, and he really hesitated, and then maybe. So, I mean, and this guy probably was in practice 15 years at the time, or more, so so let's run down the list of what they don't know. Give me the checklist of the giant maw that they are leaping into of the dentistry world.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we may need 7-8 days for this, but we know, so I'll put it in terms of myself so I don't offend anybody, because it's the same for every student who walks out today. We know nothing about running a business. We know very little, if anything, about being a leader. We have a team of people who are relying on us, and whether you're an associate, an employee in a bigger DSO group, or you actually have some sort of ownership, the team's looking to you to lead. So that's that. Now add to it where we are today, right? Look at the last year and a half and realize that last year's graduating class, as well as this year's graduating class, they're coming out with 30, maybe 40% less clinical experience on top of the whole practice management space, the legal space, the HR space, and the leadership space. And oh my goodness, there aren't enough postgraduate programs to house all these new grads who are so far behind in so many spaces.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that much, but they just haven't been able to get the live hands-on training since COVID hit. They were basically, it's one thing to, if you're in the 6th grade, you're studying from home. Yeah. But if you're supposed to be spinning a handpiece for a living, and diagnosing real people and conditions, you need to see real people. So they've got even more to catch up on. That's a challenge. So how are you able to help them with that? Are you able to say, look, you need to assist for a while, or just walk into this practice and say, whatever you need me for. We know they got to get their hand speed up, right? That they don't graduate with fast hands. Their crown preps tend to take 2 or 3 times as long, right? As a career dentist, a dentist 3 years out. So they're not blazing through the practice at all. It's an apprenticeship, really, I think is the best way to put it. And they've got to get that. And so part of what you're doing is saying, guess what? You're an apprentice. We are going to find you somebody to apprentice with. Like any craftsman, anybody taking on a trade, so to speak, you need to learn from a master. And how do you pick a master? That's the challenge. So how are dentists getting? I know dentists love to help, so in general, and they love to educate. So I think that I can see why they participate in Ignite. But how are you recruiting that? How are you approaching dentists to mentor?
Yeah, some awesome questions. So, the good news is part of our recruitment strategy is we've been around 9 years. So we've got almost a decade worth of dentists who are out there. And we spend a lot of time, and we know them well. We really, which is one of the coolest things to say, like, hey, I have 30,000 friends out there, which is nuts to say, but we know some of them are prosthodontists, periodontists, surgeons. They play well in the implant space. So we really try to niche people where they have inherent strength and extensive experience, and let them run in that lane and connect people in that lane. So that's a really great way to get mentors for us. And then the other thing we do is we kind of built two programs that are super helpful. One are our study clubs. They're small group. We max them at 15. We connect them with clinical mentors. And these are amazing dentists. They're Pankey trained, they're Dawson, Spear, Coyce. They're like you said, they're educators at heart, and they want to help. So, we try to fit the right young dentist into the right study group, the right mentor. We bring them all together, 4 different times a year virtually, so they get to kind of learn from one another. That's one big lane that's been really, really helpful. And then we built a lot of hands-on courses for them. And the past 10 months, those hands-on courses have been at home. So we, some of our industry partners, basically, like, we're sending models where they have hand pieces, right? They're either in school or in a practice or a post-grad program. We're sending materials, and we're doing exactly what we're doing now live. And we're walking people through the process. And now that we're kind of rolling out of this, we're starting to do more in-person hands-on courses. And I think the last piece is we're going into practices, and we have a really short list of clinical dentists that we're doing over-the-shoulder programs. So a young dentist can maybe tackle something that is well beyond them, but they have the seasoned pro who's working with them half a day, full day, 2 days, and they're just fast-tracking their clinical success that way, which is, ultimately just a different model of how I learned it back in the day with guys like, David Hornbrook and Mark Montgomery and Dorfman, that whole crew. It's getting in there and doing it.
Yeah, and those guys in particular that you mentioned, and there's many more of them.
Yeah.
The half the advantage is not just them teaching you how to prep a tooth or an implant or do any kind of restoration. It's listening to them talk to the patient. It's watching them move through the space. Because that's so much of it is how you go from operatory to operatory. And then, of course, and how you get into rapport with the patients. I tell people, the best thing you can do is find, when you come out of dental school, and this is what Ignite really has become. I probably started saying this 20 years ago. People would say, well, what do I do when I get out? It's like, find the best dentist you possibly can and suck spit, offer to just work in their practice for 3 months and just watch and listen, because there's a reason why they're really successful, and it's not just their hands. It's part of it. But everything that they're doing is working, and they probably learned a lot of it the hard way over 15 or 20 years, or they learned from great educators 10 years in, 15 years in, a lot of times, because a lot of people don't really get the good clinical stuff going till they're 10 years in. But now, of course, some of these dental schools are using CAD/CAM already. They're coming out of school, hopefully understanding how CEREC works and things like that, and they're coming into a new age of technology. So let's go back to David Rice, young dentist. How did you start? Because you didn't have this. So how did you keep from starving to death?
I will tell you, I was maybe fortunate enough to be a really good observer. So I sought out dentists who just made me feel like everything was possible. And sometimes it was a clinical, everything was possible. Sometimes it was on this leadership and business side, everything is possible. I had a great mentor, a dad of a friend of mine who was totally outside of dentistry, who taught me exactly who I wanted to be when I grew up, as a leader of a team by example. I mean, man, if we have time, I'll get into the story, but witnessing him in action and the authenticity and the integrity and just who he was to the people around him was priceless. So
I want to hear more about that. I think I think everybody would benefit, because leadership is such a difficult thing to learn, and yet you must learn it. And it's not something you're born with. The number of born leaders is like 1 out of every 150,000 in my mind, if that. Okay, and it's because they had really good leader dads or moms or both. But it is a lifelong. I'm still learning to be a better leader. I look back on my leadership skills, midway through 1-800-Dentist, and they were severely lacking. And because nobody taught me anything about leadership. Well, I bumbled into the entrepreneur world without any of those skills. So tell us about this person and why and how you learned from him.
Sure. I'll tell you the story. I think it'll be like really blatantly obvious to everybody who's watching and listening. So his name is Dennis. And the picture of this is literally, I'm in school. So the Wednesday before Thanksgiving is like the last rush. And then you get to go be with family for your long weekend. So I shadowed him in his business, which happened to be a women's headwear company. So he did faux fur hats, scarves prior to that being in vogue. For him, it was a principle thing. You don't have to love that at all, but that was kind of subtle lesson number 1. He chose a business based on what he really believed in. So now imagine he has all these sewers, and these are people who, they don't earn a lot of money. And again, it's Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So I watched him throw this really big Thanksgiving lunch. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. But there's probably a lot of people who do that. And then I watched him, everybody got, a turkey and 2 bottles of wine and an apple pie or a pumpkin pie. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. These are people who maybe can't bring that to their family without his help. And then something really cool happened. This is where I learned it. It's after this whole big event. There's still a couple hours left to work. And picture, everybody picture like sort of a private office of the boss, and then there's this big outer vestibule, and I'm sitting in that outer vestibule with his assistant, who's the sweetest woman. Her name's Adele. I'll never forget her face. She's like 80 years old at this time, had been with him from the get-go. And out walks this seamstress crying. And all I'm thinking is, oh my God, it's the day before Thanksgiving. He just threw a party and he fired somebody. Yeah, your expression, Fred, that was me.
Wow.
Totally me. I'm like, whoa. And Adele looks at me. She's like, what do you think happened in there? Like, I think Denny just fired somebody. Oh my God, I thought he was this great guy. She's like, I'm going to tell you because he'll never breathe a word of it. He just wrote a check for next semester's tuition for her daughter because she couldn't afford it. It wasn't a loan. It was a gift. And Denny does things like that for everybody here. They're different based on what they need in their life in that moment, but that's who he is. And Fred, I will tell you to this day, that man has never mentioned that to me out loud, not one time. And I thought, that's the kind of guy I want to be and grow up to lead like.
Oh yeah, how fortunate for you to see that.
Yeah,
because that resonates with you, and that's a lesson you can learn the rest of your life and carry it into every day. But it's a leadership thing, because we could mine that for the leadership lessons for 2 hours.
We could.
But just the fact that he wasn't posting this on Facebook. Okay.
Yeah.
He wasn't making an announcement in front of everybody. He was doing it privately.
Yeah.
He was completely leading with his giving hand and saying, and first of all, he knew what she needed. He had found out what it was she needed. And so,
100%.
What he said is, these are my people. It is my responsibility to provide work for them, and to take care of them, to be the one who really knows and understands and can help them. The loyalty that he must have engendered with that's the other big lesson is you want team loyalty. You want people who will follow you off a cliff and and they're not going to steal, they're not going to embezzle, they're not going to take your trade secrets to the competition. You can't even get them by offering them more money to come work for you. They go, I don't, that doesn't sound like enough. I really like it here. That's what can happen. So, and of course you can do that in a dental practice
all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who else is involved? Are there non-dentists involved? Are there, guys like me, the average Joes who are in the dental industry? We never went to dental school. We don't know, no initials after our name at all, really. So.
Well, if you look closely, I've penciled maybe crayoned mine in. I'm not even sure if it's penciled in. They might be crayoned in, but absolutely. We have, amazing people, lots of mutual friends of ours, guys like Jonathan Miller, who's, she's a tremendous resource for young dentists in a first practice space, whether they start up or they acquire. Attorneys, CPAs.
Yeah, because Jonathan came from the banking industry, from the dental division of Bank of America.
Absolutely.
So he knows all those twists and turns, which are significant. So with any small business, but every business is different. And if you're dealing with banks that have that division, you want to jump through the right hoops. So that's great.
Yeah, lots of folks like that. And for the seasoned pros who are watching, lots of people on the side that can then really help you too. So our job is to prepare these young, dental pros for your practice. I think I'd like to believe our job is also to help the seasoned pro understand who's coming into their practice and how to best onboard them and best ramp them up for success, because we all think differently. So we've got folks on the social media side who are just masters in all different spaces that really round out this crew. So it's a nice little community of people all working towards one end game, and that's make our profession better tomorrow.
Okay, so now David Rice, DDS, has rolled out and he's started a practice. Where'd you start? What city and why?
Great question. Because also one of my not regrets, but if I could go back and do it differently, something I do differently. So I started off after my post-grad program back in Buffalo, New York. I was an associate. I went through a couple practices. For good reasons. I kind of left people who I thought maybe didn't have the integrity that I wanted to have one day. But I learned who I didn't want to be.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you suggesting that there are dentists who operate not at the highest level of integrity? Because that's news
Shocking.
to me, and so I gotta process that.
Take that to the bank. There are some people out there. Yes, they're good and bad in every profession. But yes, so that was my associateship. I finally found the right practice for myself, which was a really good lesson if you're a young person watching. And it's have a strategy. Everything you do should be done with intention. So I knew I was looking for a practice to purchase. I positioned myself. I showed up and was present at lots of events where I knew people would see me and meet me. I didn't know anything, but at least if I was there, I had a shot. And then, found a practice where the dentist was open to mentoring me, to sticking around for a year. He didn't really treat patients that whole time, but, he shook hands and handed out cigars and kissed babies and, letting people know that I was the right person to take over. And that's, the whole goodwill piece that's so incredibly valuable and not always there. And then one day,
Well, I want to stop there because that's so important, because there's a lot of people in some level of transition. They're acquiring a practice. To me, there's a powerful lesson in that. You want to be able to acquire a practice and have the dentist willing to stick around and essentially promote you to the new patients. It's like, look, I have found my replacement for you. You can count on this decision because I have vetted this dentist for you. That's a big difference between that and here's the keys. And the difference is, and the stats are out there, is when it's here's the keys, you lose 30% of that patient base in the first 2 years. They just they go somewhere else, or they just never come back to you. So you've bought a practice that's got a discount attached to it that maybe you didn't factor in. So be looking for that dentist who cares enough about his patients in his practice that he wants to make sure they're taken care of. And he's selling it to you with that in mind. So really, really important lesson with all of the transitions, because there's a lot of dentists reaching retirement age out there now. It's a pretty big number, isn't it?
It's a huge number, which is great. If you're a young dentist, there are, I know you're thinking, it's COVID, the whole world's falling apart, but this is a tremendous time to be a young dentist because there's so many people who are exiting dentistry, and dentistry's been really good to an awful lot of them. So having that conversation, to your point, Fred, of, hey, can you stick around? Not to take the production from me so much, but to help walk me through this process. And a lot of good-hearted people are happy to stay and help.
Yeah, and I think they realize also, oh my gosh, I don't want to sit at home all day. I don't want to necessarily spin a handpiece, but I like going there. And these are my people, these are my patients, and my team still. Yeah. So that's an important part of the whole transition. So you buy a practice. And you're off and running. You're off to the races. There's no more problems after that.
Not one. Not one problem.
Well, and you picked Buffalo. You picked Buffalo, New York, which I've never gone up that high in America, but I hear it snows.
It just a little from July to May. No, so I picked Buffalo. I will tell you, I love Buffalo. Buffalo's been very, very great to me. It's a wonderful town for healthcare. However, I picked Buffalo because it's where my family was from, and I love my family, and that's a good reason. But it's a bad overall reason because in my heart, I'm a warm weather guy. I'm an ocean guy, which meant every day I woke up and I was sort of missing this thing. So I loved my practice. I loved my personal life, but I was missing something, so, silly me waits till, 48 years old to decide to pick up and move 1,500 miles away and then create the longest commute in dentistry. So I would encourage everybody out there to, sit back with your personal vision before you worry about this practice vision. Are you a mountains person? Are you an ocean person? Are you a city person, a suburban person? And start there. Start where you're going to wake up overly joyed every single morning to wake up and be where you are.
Yeah, because it's really, you're going to be there one way or another for 40 years. Okay. Or 35 to 40, or maybe more. Who knows? I mean, we all know dentists who are 75, 76, 77. They're still doing 1 day a week in the practice, and they will continue to do that. So, because it's satisfying to them, it's a place to go. It's a great thing to be able to do. If you can get kind of hooked on helping people, making them healthier. It's hard to replace that when you stop. But yeah, it's figuring out where you want to practice is not just a haphazard thing or something that you get led into. Now, it may be that being around family is the most important thing, right? You don't care if you can surf or not. You care that your brothers and sisters and parents and nephews and nieces are all around. Fine. Then you can, that's where you should be practicing. But if you're drawn to a different climate, a different environment, I know dentists who nothing makes them happier than the fact that they're in Idaho and it's 30 miles to the grocery store. Okay. And then other dentists, like they're in Midtown Manhattan, and their entire patient base comes from a 2-block radius, yeah. And they couldn't be happier. Maybe this was a rough year for them, but Manhattan was where they wanted to be. They wanted to, and they as a dentist, they could afford to live there, and they could have a high-end practice on Central Park West or something like that. So it's really good advice. And I love this, all of this, because I know what's happening is your young mentees. I don't know what happened to the word protege, by the way. I want and turned into mentee. That sounds like a sea animal to me, but that's just my own. I get hung up on words, but I can that they're hearing these things because so many of us, and it's across the board. We don't hear these things till we're 45 or something like that. And we go, man, I wish I knew that at 17 or 22 or even 30, so just a beautiful thing. So eventually you uprooted and left the Buffalo practice behind.
Yeah, I did. I know for me, and this has been a really cool journey. So I scaled it. I went from one dentist to 2 to 3 to 4. And I'm a big fan of if you do it well and everybody communicates well. I love having people around me. It felt the energy in our practice was amazing. And then, 3.5 years ago, Anastasia and I said, hey, let's go to that warm weather in that ocean. Let's do that. And, I fly a lot already from, the whole speaking side of the industry. So I thought, I'm on a plane 30 times a year. What's being on a plane 40 times a year? It's not that big of a deal. And, did that whole commute for, a good 2.5 years, 3 years really till COVID hit. And, that this kind of changed direction, but, you pivot, you learn, there were 4 dentists. So how do we build that so we can maintain that structure and I get to make that commute and the practice still gets to thrive. But part of that was me transitioning out as an owner and going full circle back to an associate so the leaders could be present full time and I wasn't a disruption. I was helpful, not hurtful.
Yeah, you weren't doing the drive-by leadership, just pop in occasionally and create chaos, generally speaking. Yeah, I mean, they in an environment like that where so much is going on and and it's so personal because between the patients and the team members that they want to feel like the leader is there. I think that's another great lesson that you learned is can I make this transition and downshift to an associate? I actually don't know if I've heard of people doing that, but so I love the idea because it would certainly could do that at 65. But you said I'm trying to course correct my Buffalo decision here, and so this is how I do it. So brilliant move, and also you had the team in mind when you did it. So you were able to execute it. So let's look at. I love asking people what they think their biggest mistake was, and they generally come back and go, "Wow, that's a very competitive list at this point in my life." Could you give me a category?
Exactly.
Because we all got here with not without scars, right? But they were usually instructive. So can you think of like, it doesn't have to be the biggest mistake you ever made, but like good enough, like a big enough pothole that you just went, wow, that took the wheel and the rim right off. So
sure. Plenty of those. Plenty of those. I'll tell you the one that like sort of immediately comes to my mind because I feel like it's a really universal one if we're all being honest and open about it is there were plenty of times in my career that I should have asked better questions and admitted that I didn't have the answers to the questions because I could have learned so much more instead of trying to avoid looking foolish. And I think the most productive people in life, probably the happiest people in life, are people who are just, wide open. I don't know the answer to that, or help me with that. Could you show me why? Or when someone says, "Do you understand?" No, I don't understand. And I leaned more towards, "Oh yeah, I got this," instead of learning more than I could have faster. So it took me longer to get where I wanted to go.
I think I share that. I think the hardest thing for me to say for many, many years was, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was my responsibility to come up with some answer.
Yeah.
So I became really good at creating answers that sounded right and weren't necessarily, and often were disproven over time, if not immediately by somebody else in the room that went, just look that up on Google ruined me. And right, people could check right away. It's like, no, that's, Argentina's in South America. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Right. But yeah, that's a very powerful thing. I hate feedback. And I know I need it. It's painful for me to get feedback. And I've learned to ask for it and shut up and take it. But man, it was hard. I would like to kill the messenger most of the time when that happened. That was very satisfying to me because that absolved me of any responsibility for the feedback. But yeah, so if you can develop that active listening and don't know everything, you'll actually end up knowing more. I think that's really powerful. And you know what? You'll succeed more because you couldn't possibly know everything. You didn't come out of the womb, with, knowledge, you were pooping yourself, so it's important to remember that, like, we're all learning all the time. And if we're not, we're in trouble. We're stalled. And if you're in a plane and it's stalled, the net result is crash and burn. So it's only a matter of time. You can only glide so long. So I'm milking the heck out of this metaphor, I know. But so what's next for you? I mean, your Ignite is rolling. You guys are on track. You've transitioned out of your practice to a junior level. And so is there some other greater vision out there? What's the grand scheme beyond this? Or this is a pretty massive transformative purpose. So I'm not challenging it. I'm just you're a dreamer. So I'm going to see if you see over the next horizon.
Short answer, yes. I feel like we still have a lot of digging to do with Ignite. So that's a lane I'm going to be in for. I see myself in that lane through my 70s. If you said, is there something else that's a come down the horizon? I have this crazy notion that, like, my next side hustle is got nothing to do with business and everything to do with trying to just contribute more to, the community of people around me. And, I see, I'm in Florida now, so I see lots of people who, it's not like Buffalo. You don't hang out in the streets because it's too cold if you can't afford to have a home. But in Florida, I see so many men, women, kids. I mean, these are like, they're late teens and early 20s and they're kids and they're out there. And I just feel like this gut thing inside me that says, when I can get Ignite to this really amazing place that I got to practice, so our team is firing on all cylinders, and my role is to continue to help people bring the vision beyond where I can see it. And I feel like my next job is to try to just be there for the people in my community and figure out if in some teeny small way I can make life a little bit better or inspire them to maybe want something different for themselves. I know it's like way more complicated of a, psychological and psychological issue out there, but I don't know. That's where I see my last stop's going to be.
Well, it's pulling you, which is interesting because, it'll take shape. The fact that you're not clear on how you're going to do it doesn't really matter. It's, the mission itself or the vision or the desire to do that, I think is really great. And what I see about you, I think is, and I'm not sure where you picked this up either, so I'm going to ask, is you seem to be really strong at delegating, like willing to find people. You're not like, I can do all of this. Let me run the show. That doesn't seem to be an urge in you.
Not at all. And, a lesson, I learned it quickly the hard way, thankfully. But, early on when Mark Wendling. So Mark was my associate, became my partner, and we are like 180 degrees from each other. We're philosophically the same human on how we want to treat people. But I think our styles of everything else are different. And I remember in the beginning thinking like, why is this guy not like me? And I'm 1,000% sure I would walk out of the room and Mark would smack his head against the wall and think, if he could just be remotely like me, he'd be better off. And then one day, we both kind of looked at each other and I'm like, wow, I'm so much better at this leadership when you do all the things you're great at and I do the same things I'm pretty good at. And together we're really good at this. And then when we brought on another dentist, we realized this is so much better if we just lean on each other. So thankfully I learned that lesson in my early 30s. And it burns me sometimes, but I think the big picture of it all is it's the greatest move for me and what I'd recommend to everybody.
Yeah, that when you learn, many people fall into the trap of they hire somebody exactly like them. It's like a business full of replicants, and that's not helpful. That's you're a person, all of us, with strengths and weaknesses. Find somebody who has different weaknesses that are not, you've got those strengths and they're covering your weaknesses. I always needed a CFO because I was never going to run the numbers on any scenario. I was going to paint the grand vision, and then the CFO had to come in and go, "What, you're not talking about this week, right?" And then my COO would go, "Okay, this is how long that'll actually take. I know you think we can do it in 2 weeks, but realistically, this is how it's going to happen, and this is who." And it would be great because I could be the visionary, but I couldn't drive the train right off the edge on my own. There were people, and I had the same thing. My partner in 800 Dentists we were philosophically completely aligned, but he was a master salesperson and really understood how to create a culture from a very personality oriented side. And I was really strong in the advertising and communication side. And just even like in a sales pitch, I could never do the same sales pitch twice. Right. I could craft it so that it was getting the best message across, but I had to freestyle it. It was just the way I was going to go. Once we had the pitch down, they wouldn't let me do sales anymore because Gary could do it exactly the same over and over and over again because that's what worked. And so because of it, we learned to trust it. It's like he said, you do that and I'll do this, and together we'll do the stuff that needs to get done. Or we're going to find some people. We're going to, find somebody to fill this other gap that neither of us cover, and then eventually obsolete ourselves. That was the other thing. Is very important. Is like there's somebody better than you at everything.
Yeah.
And when you learn that, and when you let your ego go and say, I want people better than me, smarter than me at everything. It changes everything for you. And because of that, Gary and I we had this trust and this gratitude for each other and the contribution that the other person brought. And we also learned the power of partnership, the power of collaboration. Learned it all the hard way, millions down the drain, learning it. As you say, you don't call it right. One of the hardest things, and everybody, I think the message it's important to put out. If I were talking to young dentists, I'd say, you are not going to hire right every time. Okay. Right. If you do it 70% of the time, you're crushing it. Okay, you are in a 1%er in terms of it. If we're doing 50-50 most of the time, we're doing really well. It's really hard to find people.
Agree.
So and how do you help people do that? I'm sure you have some thoughts on that as well. And how do you figure out how to hire?
I think I'm always looking for people who are just highly motivated. You can teach people to do anything. They have to come with the right attitude. They have to be thirsty for it. They have to want it. And step 2 is, build a program that continually coaches people along. Don't just let it randomly happen. Trust people implicitly, but verify and get out of their way. That's it. That's the recipe.
Yeah, it's never going to be so much set it and forget it. It's like you have to keep growing them. Growth is what makes their job satisfying. And a lot of times they're not in dentistry. They're not going to get promoted, right? They're right. Going to be in that position. So it's more important in our industry than a lot of other industries to say, we're going to, you're an assistant. We're going to get you extended function training. You're doing this. We're going to teach you to do cancer screening. We're going to get this new technology. You're going to learn how to assist me on that. That's going to make their career interesting. And because they're never going to get promoted to dentist,
Absolutely.
Like, yeah. So it's a weird thing about the industry, but it's, when you accept the reality, it's a heck of a great place to go to work every day for everybody. It can be. And I think that's, if dentists know that and you say, look, as a leader, you can create an environment where the patients are appreciative of what you do. Your team is excited to come to work every day, and you are fulfilled because you're making a tremendous impact on your community. That's not easy to find. That's, how many jobs are like that? Thank you for all of this, David. Are there any parting tidbits of wisdom that you would like to pass on to dentists in general? And of course, you're still looking for mentors, right? You're always looking. Tell me what you want to say to dentists out there who are listening, who this appeals to them. They go like, well, I would do that. How do I do that?
Absolutely. No, I guess parting words are, love what you do. If you don't love what you do, figure out what you should be doing. And if you are at all interested in bettering the next generation and kind of together we rise mindset, which is what we believe in, please reach out. You can reach me, david.rice@ignitedds.com is my email, or @IgniteDDS on Instagram, probably the 2 easiest ways to reach me. But please do reach out. And Fred, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and of course, this will be in the show notes, so you'll be able to find him and you'll be able to find IgniteDDS. We'll have the URL there. Thank you, David. It always excites me when I see somebody who's taken their career and found something that has just tremendous impact. And so this is one of the reasons why I was so eager to have you on the Remarkable Dentist podcast, because I think what you are doing is very powerful, and you come from just a generous place. And so I admire that very much in you. And I hope that other people can be inspired and see that dentistry is a platform where you can make massive changes and have tremendous impact on the world. It's not just, and there's nothing wrong with just doing it in your own community, but if you want to dream big, the launch pad is built for you. So David is a great example of that. So thank you, David. And to everyone else out there, keep being remarkable. And of course, subscribe to the podcast and like it and share it and do all that stuff that podcasters desperately crave and need to keep alive for some reason. But anyway, thank you all for listening, and see you on the next podcast.